All right. So Indianapolis is always an exciting time for us. It's particularly this year where we go into the offseason with what will likely be 11 picks, including number 2 overall, and our first time in 3 years with a pick in the top 50. So we're looking forward to getting to know these 300-plus guys in Indianapolis over the next week, and continue to do more work over the next few months to see who becomes Browns in April. Before I open up for questions, let me just touch on Myles. So Myles, as you guys have all heard me say, he's a huge part of our organization, really good person. He's an awesome player. Understand the trade requests and everything, but our stance really has not changed. We can't imagine a situation where not having Myles as a part of the organization is best for the Browns. So I just want to hit that off the top, and with that, I'll open up for questions.
How did you feel when he expressed no confidence in you producing a winner?
Yeah, Tony, I think if you by that you mean the trade requests, I think trade requests, they happen across the league all the time, and I think at times for individual players that they'll have certain interests during different parts of their career, where they're a young player, a veteran player, things like that. That's not unusual. It's not the first for us. It probably won't be the last. It's not the first across the league, but we appreciate Myles, and like I said, we're not interested in moving him.
But he said your vision doesn't align with his and being a winning team.
Yeah, so I didn't see maybe that specific thing, Tony, but like I said, we've had plenty of dialogue with Myles, really since he's been a Brown, and certainly after the season with him in his camp. Certainly understand his frustration from last year. We're all frustrated, but our focus is on obviously making the changes and the pieces to make sure that we don't feel like we did at the end of last season.
So along those lines, he seems like he's kind of drawing a line in the sand a little bit on he definitely wants out. But do you feel confident there's a path forward where you guys can be simpatico and get back on the same page?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, understand the frustration. We've had plenty of dialogue, but ultimately my responsibility is to make the decisions that are best for the Browns, and having Myles a part of the organization is a huge piece of that. So Scott, we've had plenty of dialogue, throughout the season and after the season ended. Certainly both him and his camp, both before and after the trade requests, and again, our interest is in keeping Myles in Cleveland.
Andrew, were you aware of the trade request? Did the team know it was coming?
We were aware it was a possibility with the conversations that we had.
And did you know that statement was coming out?
Yeah, I wouldn't get into those specifics, but again, our focus is on building the team, and again, Myles has got to be a big part of that.
How many calls have you got?
I wouldn't really touch on any conversations that I had with other teams, just respectfully. I don't think that's appropriate just for current and future business, but it's irrelevant to this situation because we're not interested in moving Myles.
So is there an offer that can change your mind, or is it just a pipeline?
It would go to what I said before, Dan, where we don't have an interest in trading Myles. He's a big part of our team.
If you guys do an extension with Myles, and you did tell us at the Super Bowl that you are interested in a contract with Myles that you might finish his career, is that something that you necessarily need to have around the start of the league year, or know what's going on in the situation, so you know how to do business and proceed?
It's a good question, Mary Kay. I think if you've probably seen over the past 5 years, whenever you get into extension talks, they can happen at any time. And I've learned not to predict those because oftentimes those negotiations, they can go up and down and back and forth. I think if you look at our history through 2020, we've had some that have occurred in March or April, some that have occurred in June, July, some that have occurred in season, and some who have occurred as late as December. So I can't begin to predict. But we really do take the approach with our cash and cap planning. We take a multi-year time horizon and to accommodate the flexibility that we need.
Andrew, when Myles met with you after the season, did you have
Tony, I wouldn't go into the specifics in terms of those meetings. I don't think it's not something I've ever done with players and everything like that. I understand the interest in the question, but I just don't think it's appropriate to share.
Gives you optimism that you can turn things around this season?
Yeah, listen, we have a number of really good people, in the organization, coaches, front office, players. We are looking forward to the opportunities that are in front of us, over the course of the spring, with both free agency, the draft, trade market, things of that nature. And, we're excited to continue building this thing and get it back on track.
How much stress? The cap, are you expected to get a credit for Deshaun's contract? Are you insurance to get credited back to you for cap space this season?
I really do have a standard policy that I really don't talk about, contracts in public settings. So I understand the interest, but that's not something that I would address.
Can you give any details on how he needed this surgery?
Yeah, so obviously Deshaun, he re-injured his Achilles. Unfortunately he turned his foot ankle area that caused the re-tear during the normal stages of the recovery process. I know there's been a lot of speculation and everything out there, but there's nothing nefarious. It's just an unfortunate accident. So our focus is on making sure that he gets healthy and can be back to normal.
Do you have any further clear idea of the timetable? I know that season
Yeah, it's probably too early to pin that down with certainty. He will miss significant time. How far that spans into 2025, I can't give you a specific right now. He's shown to be a fast healer, and we're going to try and be as thoughtful and aggressive with the recovery process. But that's not something that I could predict at the current moment. Also, appreciate the hoodie.
How can you be sure there's a path forward when you have a guy who's so adamant that, hey, this is about what I want in terms of winning, not money, and how do you grow, I guess, past that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, actually, I think we're all frustrated with, not winning enough last year, and, certainly he shares in that sentiment. But at the end of the day, our decisions are about what's best for the Browns, and, what's best for the Browns is to have Myles on the roster.
What value did Mike Vrabel bring to your team last season, and how did you maybe see him mature during his time?
Yeah, Mike's awesome. I think it starts with he has this infectious energy. He's a ball coach. He loves being on the grass. He loves being with players. He loves developing young coaches. I think the other thing that's very understated about Mike, you got to understand, Mike was a highly accomplished player at Ohio State, highly accomplished player in New England. Coached big-time football, great DC in Houston, and then a Coach of the Year in Tennessee. And despite all he's accomplished, he has the humility of a first-time QC coach in the league. And I think that that's something that's really endearing to the people that work with him. He can coach any position on the field, and he has more knowledge in his pinky finger than probably most people would in 20 years of football. And so New England's very, very, very fortunate to hire him, and I think he'll do a great job there.
How would you compare or evaluate the trade market at the top of the draft this year to maybe some other drafts that see the top?
Yeah, I think honestly, at this stage, probably the trade market at the top of the draft, it's yet to maybe reveal itself. We still are really early in the evaluation process on the college side. I think that's something that will perhaps have more visibility over the next several months as teams can get to know the prospects.
And Tommy talked about decision making being the number one trait he looks for in a quarterback. How, in settings like this, is it in interviews? What is it that how do you find
that part of it? Yeah.
Part of it?
That's a great question, Chris. I think it's twofold. I think number one, there's a fair amount that you can tell from the film, how are they going through their progressions. Okay, this is the concept, this is the coverage, this is where you think they should go with the ball. But probably the bigger piece, as you mentioned, Chris, is the idea of talking to them during these settings and during the spring and really seeing how they think. Whether you talk through a successful play or honestly a lot of times that are more helpful is okay, let's talk through an unsuccessful play and see what led to the decision and then ultimately what they learned from it. So this time, beginning in Indianapolis is incredibly valuable for that position for those very reasons. But it's something by the end of the process that we do believe that we'll have a really good feel for.
Joel Bitonio has said he's not decided yet. How does that uncertainty affect you guys?
Zach, it's a good question. Joel is still deciding. We have really great dialogue, but we're prepared in both situations.
How does Andrew use strategy and we perform with a lot of better quarterbacks, considering better this year? How do you go about analyzing your in that situation? What you're looking for if they're fit, and how much they're still able to play later in their career?
That's a great question, Jory. I'll say number one, it's not an easy evaluation. I think it first starts with what you really want to accomplish on the offense side of the ball. Look, we'd all want the person who can do everything, but there are only so few of those players that exist. So at that point, based on your existing infrastructure and what you want to do schematically, it's about prioritizing some of the must-haves. Chris mentioned earlier, decision making. It's a big thing for for us at the Browns. So that's a must-have. Guys that have that characteristic at an acceptable level or higher, will be prioritized maybe relative to others. In some areas, it may be arm strength or anticipation or the ability to move. And what you're doing, you're weighing these different bundles of characteristics and then ultimately aiming at the ones that have the most of what you desire. Now, the added element or the added layer on top is availability and cost. And that's not something that we'll know for a couple weeks, but you do as much planning as you can because, free agency and the trade market, they generally take different twists and turns, or at least that has been our experience over the past 5 years.
Andrew, we have
I'm sorry, Zach, I didn't hear you. Yeah, so I think there are two things that I really respect and appreciate, that Howie has always done. I think, number one, just the philosophy of quarterback in trenches. That's something that's enormous, and I think it's pretty enduring in our sport. And I think the second thing is, Philly's creativity in terms of pulling every lever in terms of how they build the roster, whether it's drafts, whether it's trades, whether it's free agency, and how they both use and manipulate their resources. That's what makes them the best right now.
Andrew, are you willing to trade the second pick if we offer?
Yeah, I think all those discussions are too early. I guess I'm open to anything that would help us, improve the team, but none of those decisions have been made. Here, let me go here because you haven't asked a question yet, have you? Okay. Okay, I'll do you next. I'll get you next.
We have a unique prospect, Travis Hunter, cornerback, wide receiver. How do you value that? That's a unique thing in the NFL now. And do you have a specific position you think is his primary position?
Well, I'd say this in terms of Travis Hunter, cornerback or receiver. The answer is yes. So he can play both, and I think that's what makes him special. We would see him as a receiver primarily first, but I think part of what makes him a bit of a unicorn is the fact that he can do both at a high level. Go ahead, James.
How would you describe the stress or angst that accompanies not having a long-term answer?
So I always have this saying. Whenever I talk to people who are earlier in their careers, and it's a piece of advice that I wish I had learned earlier and taken earlier, and it's just get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like there are things that are going to make you uncomfortable every offseason, especially when you're in essence, a risk-taking position, a risk-taking decision-making position, and that's like the reality of the beast. So at this point in my career, that's not something that really gives me a ton of anxiety.
Andrew, Shedeur,
I'll come back to you. Let me get someone and I'll come back to you.
earlier this offseason that there are opportunities every offseason. What do you identify so far this offseason to improve the roster and turn things around in the next season?
Yeah, it's a great question, but that's one that probably can't answer in terms of specificity. Don't necessarily want to show our cards, but I think there are always opportunities in every avenue. Whether it's the 11 draft picks that we have, whether it's on the free agent market and guys that are become available, and then certainly the trade market with some opportunities that are already available and others that we won't know about for the next couple weeks. So our big thing is flexibility and being opportunistic, and that'll continue to be the case for us. Go ahead, Tony's next.
Shedeur and DeAndre made several references to the Browns, whether it's playing Madden or his first visit, building Musgrave being his favorite. What do you make of all that?
I don't make much of it, Tony, just because it's a long way to go. But I will say this: we got a chance to spend some time with Shedeur at the East-West. We'll get some time to spend with him during the upcoming week. He's a fantastic individual. He's really smart, really driven. Grew up around football and was highly successful. So it's been a pleasure to spend time with him. We're looking forward to spending more over the next several weeks. But there's still a long way to go with everything, and so we'll work through that as appropriate. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the first part of your question.
How much due diligence do you plan to invest in head coaching prospects? What maybe stands out initially with them?
Yeah, so I'd say this. It goes although Zach left, he asked this question and left, but it goes back to Zach's question in terms of where we are philosophically similar to Philly is that we do believe in building through the trenches. So there won't be a year that we don't do a ton of work on the big guys, including the edge rushers. Look, I think I heard the statistic yesterday that this year at the Combine there's a record number of defensive linemen that got invited, and that probably does tell you what you need to know about the class. That if you're looking for defensive linemen and you're looking for rushers, this is probably the right year to look.
Andrew, Dewan, second year in a row, obviously he ends up with in the season with an injury, but then he has another procedure on that knee. How much of a concern is that for, especially at the weight he's carrying?
Yeah, so Chris, I'd say that the individual injury itself is. Let me knock on wood on this because this went the wrong way for us last year. But the injury individually of itself is not something that is creating a lot of anxiety. But what we do want to focus on is making sure that Dewan can end the season healthy, because durability it's a huge part of it, and we're a better team when he's on the field and he's healthy. So that's a major focus of his offseason programming.
Why do you see
Couple more.
I'm sorry?
Why do you see Travis first as a receiver?
I mean, honestly, Scott, I would say this: it's 6 one way, half dozen another. He can play both. I do think that there's just an element where his superpower, they're really his ball skills, and that's a position where you can use it 100 times during the season versus maybe 30 on the high end. But look, we'll have our coaches and scouts fight it out in terms of where he should be on the board. But any team he goes to will be happy to have him.
Andrew, how much does job security factor into the front office decision-making process?
It doesn't at all. That's not something I spend any time on. I have too much respect and appreciation for everybody in the organization, and really make decisions accordingly.
Do you expect JOK to play this year?
Yeah, Tony, I wish I had a specific update for you on Jeremiah. I could say that he's slowly making progress. He's going through all that's required medically, but I don't have anything specific on that right now. I'm sorry? Yeah, he's tough, physical, a rare athlete with outstanding speed. He's special in his own regard that he can play off the ball, he can rush the passer. So he's an excellent prospect.
Andrew, could you see
Last one here.
Andrew, could you see the team maybe changing quarterback plans to better suit Myles makes the better long-term option?
It'd be what I mentioned a little bit ago. Our job is ultimately to make the decisions that are best for the Browns organization, and oftentimes you want to make all of your players, your coaches, staff as happy as possible with their interests. But those interests always have to be aligned with what's best for the team, and that'll always be front and center in our decision-making process. All right, thank you, everyone.